Israel has established a new wartime government. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and National Unity Party leader Benny Gantz have established a small war cabinet. This as Israel prepares for the next phase of its military operation in Gaza to, as the government says, eliminate Hamas. Israel is also facing threats in the country's north from Hezbollah, which operates in the southern regions of Lebanon. President Joe Biden says the U.S. stands with Israel, and he is issuing a warning to Iran.
We're surging additional military assistance to the Israeli Defense Force, including ammunition, interceptors to replenish the Iron Dome, and we've moved the U.S. carrier fleet to the Eastern Mediterranean, and we're sending more fighter jets there in that region, and made it clear to the Iranians, be careful.
Matthew Levitt is a counterterrorism and intelligence expert at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. In 2008-2009, he served as a U.S. State Department counterterrorism advisor to the Special Envoy for Middle East Regional Security. Matthew Levitt, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with Hamas on a basic level, a listed terrorist entity in both Canada and the United States. What can you tell us about their origin and how they came to control Gaza?
Hamas was founded in the late 1980s and was known for many years for carrying out suicide bombings, targeting civilian buses, cafes, shooting attacks. By 2006, it decided to participate in Palestinian elections, and that led to the formation of a national unity government between Hamas and Fatah. That was surprising because Fatah is a secular party that believes in a two-state solution. Hamas is a Sunni Islamist party that is against a two-state solution and wants an Islamist state created in all of historic Palestine, meaning Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. Fast forward to today, what Hamas is fighting about is not the lack of a two-state solution. It's the fact that Israel exists. In 2007, Hamas took over the Gaza Strip by force of arms, not force of arms shooting at Israelis, but force of arms shooting at fellow Palestinians. And ever since then, it has controlled the Gaza Strip. Now, the Israelis have tried to come to a modus vivendi with Hamas. You don't have to, like us. You don't have to formally accept us. We'll allow workers to come in from Gaza into Israel to work. We'll make sure that there's electricity transferred through. You can get money from other countries like Qatar in return for calm. And that tends to last for several years at a time. We've seen now several waves of rocket wars between Hamas and Israel, but this is entirely different. And it puts to bed the idea, really the myth, that there are separate wings within Hamas. It is engaged in social and political and religious activities, and it is engaged in militant and terrorist activities, but these are not two separate organizations. This is all part of one holistic organization. And it appears now that Hamas had been planning for some time with, let's call it, strategic assistance from Iran, which has always funded it and trained it and provided it with weapons, and Lebanese Hezbollah to the north of Israel, to someday try and put their ideology into place. And so now we see this barbaric attack in southern Israel and some 150 hostages taken back into the Gaza Strip, including many Westerners. We don't know, for example, how many Americans, but we know that there are Americans that were taken and at least 20 killed.
So within the Palestinian political structures and political sphere, there's Hamas, there's Fatah, you've mentioned. What is Hamas's relationship with the Palestinian Authority, and how do they interact?
The backbone of the Palestinian Authority is Fatah. And the Palestinian Authority is the entity that was created from the Oslo Accords and is therefore generally still committed to the idea of a two-state solution. Mm-hmm. Hamas opposes that. So within the Palestinian political polity, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, and by extension Fatah, are political rivals. But Hamas also has recently been trying to build itself up as an alternative to Fatah and try and take over various Palestinian political structures, including the Palestinian Authority, the Palestine Liberation Organization, and these are organizations that don't have much love for each other. Right. And Hamas sometimes will target Israel in an attempt to undermine the PA.
Okay, so the atrocities we saw on Saturday and throughout the weekend, and still learning some of the details on it, the assessment is that this was planned by the Hamas commander, Mohammed Deif. He's thought to be the mastermind behind all of this. What do we know about him?
Mohammed Deif has been a leader of the Hamas military structure, its terrorist wing, the Al-Qassam brigades, for many years. Israelis tried to assassinate him at one point and missed, but reportedly injured him. He generally stays out of the media limelight, but he is the commander of the Qassam brigades in the Gaza Strip. He, together with a whole bunch of other people from the Qassam brigades, are believed to have put this together. And it's very, very clear that there was significant input from Iran and Hezbollah, that's Lebanese Hezbollah to the north, because this exact operation comes out of Hezbollah's playbook. The Israel Defense Forces, the Israeli military, has literally been training to thwart exactly this type of an operation in the north, with Hezbollah coming in through the border, killing as many people as possible, taking as many people hostage back into Lebanon, shooting rockets. And so now Hamas has executed it in the south, and I believe they've had catastrophic success. I don't think they believed they would have this much success, and now they're trying to figure out what to do with it, because the Israelis simply cannot sit back and allow 150 hostages to remain in Gaza.
So on that point, successful, success as you frame it from the Hamas perspective, but obviously, a horrific body count, the murder of babies. What were they trying to accomplish with this? What is the larger strategic goal behind launching an assault on a rave and on kibbutzes and on just ordinary citizens?
Well, there are several things that are going on here. At the most basic, Hamas still remains committed to the idea of the destruction of Israel. Again, Hamas is not fighting for a two-state solution. It's against a two-state solution. It wants to destroy Israel. Second, I think Hamas and Hezbollah have begun believing their own rhetoric. Hezbollah leader Nasrallah has talked about Israel being weaker than a spider's web. And they've had many press conferences where they've talked about, look at what's happening in Israel, the political and social dysfunction. And they believe that Israel was distracted and was weak and maybe saw this as a time to do something. I think the precipitant event, though, the really reason to do it right now, was the potential for normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. It's one thing for there to be an Abraham Accords with countries like Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates making peace with Israel. Those are smaller states. Saudi Arabia is the most important state in the Gulf region, maybe in the Middle East. And it is the custodian of the two holiest sites to the Muslim faith. And I think Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas all feared that if this normalization happened, there'd be a cascade effect. Other Arab and Muslim countries would ultimately normalize with Israel, and this would pose two problems for them. First, it would create a de facto alliance of moderate states allied together in part to join forces to defend themselves against Iran and its proxies. And the second is specifically to Hamas. It would leave Hamas on the outs, and the only entities within the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that people would look to on the Palestinian side would be those not aligned with Iran, the PA, Fatah, etc. Right. They saw this as an existential threat and decided to take action to undermine it. And I think in this sense, it will be painfully successful. It will disrupt normalization for a time. When all of the fighting, please God, is over, I think at the end of the day, it's going to leave people in Saudi Arabia, in Israel, in the UAE, and elsewhere thinking to themselves, wait, we really do need to work together to counter the threats from Iran and its proxies. Look what they just did. Right.
So speaking of Iran and its proxies, Hezbollah is mentioned a lot in this. You've mentioned it in this conversation. They have been mentioned throughout this conflict, the threat of a widening conflict with them coming in from the north through Lebanon, their relationship with Hamas, and the risk, you think, in Hezbollah escalating things at this point.
So Iran has a network of proxies, but first among equals, the most important, the most capable, the best armed and trained is Lebanese Hezbollah, based in southern Lebanon, just north of Israel. So the fighting in the Gaza Strip is at the southern border, but Israel also has to deal with threats from Hezbollah on the northern border. And I don't think there is any way that Hamas would take such a bold, drastic action without some level of confidence that if it were able to draw Israel in to a ground war in Gaza, which I think is what Hamas wants, that it would have support from its allies to the north to open a second front against Israel. I don't know that Hezbollah wants to do that. I don't know that Iran wants Hezbollah to do that, because ultimately Iran wants Hezbollah and its some 200,000 rockets pointed at Israel to be there as a safety net in the event that Israel ever decides to do something about Iran's nuclear program. But Hezbollah is already signaling that Israel has to be worried if it does go in a ground war. There have been several border incursions by Hezbollah operatives from Lebanon into Israel. If there is a second front opened in the north, the threat that Hezbollah poses to Israel is even much more significant than the threat that Hamas poses from the south.
So if Hezbollah does act, the foreign minister said here on the show the other day that their big focus is trying to stop this from spiraling into a wider regional conflict and contain it to where it is. But if Hezbollah should act, I mean, can it be contained, or does it just spiral from there?
I think that if Hezbollah acts, it depends how it acts. It could fire a few missiles. It's already done a few of those. It could send thousands of missiles and try and storm the fence and storm the border. The Israelis have been preparing for this for some time, but again, fighting on two fronts, they will only have so much resources. The United States is trying to prevent this from happening by signaling publicly, and I understand privately too, to Iran and to Hezbollah, that this would be a very dangerous move. The U.S. has moved a carrier group of ships to the Eastern Mediterranean and have signaled that should Hezbollah do something like this that would truly threaten Israel, perhaps U.S. forces could get involved. They have not said it that explicitly, but you don't send a carrier group to just wave from the deck. And so this could spiral, and it's really a question of what Hamas and Hezbollah decide to do. It's important to remind, Israelis didn't start this, America didn't start this, Canada didn't start this. This was started by an invasion by Hamas, as you said, killing babies and worse.
Matthew Levitt, a counterterrorism and intelligence expert at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Thank you so much for your time today.